guest is someone that we have. I don't actually need to re-explain why we're doing this, but for the audience, I want to let you know, Health Datapalooza has been this patient experience for a long time. Have had patient scholarships. Have had patients. We could probably put those down for the sake of. But these are our badges. We're actually here at the conference.
We're here in DC.
And have been a long time. Have you been here before? I think
I've been coming here since 2018, and this is where we actually met.
This is where we met. Okay. Yeah, I feel very good about that. Okay, so actually, it's a perfect value proposition for Datapalooza. I don't think we would have met
had it not been for exactly.
Okay. Exactly. So it is exactly these kind of connections that Academy Health intends to enable by having people in the patient community come. I have learned a lot from you already. I expect to learn more today. And I will let you introduce yourself. But in general, we want you, the patient who's possibly watching this, we wanted to make sure we have content that was available to you, even though we're not in a position to stream the whole conference. What would have been best if we could have just had everything on the stage all the time, and then maybe another room like this also streaming. But that turned out to be prohibitively expensive. And so what we're trying this year, and what Academy Health gave me permission to try this year, is to have this streaming up in the hotel where the Wi-Fi is good and stable, and they don't have to pay tens of thousands of dollars for it, and enable us to be able to communicate to the patients who can't afford to come, or for many people are concerned about infection or are in fact having COVID, right? So they're home for good reasons. There's a lot of reasons why a patient might not be able to make it, and we still want to be able to honor that connection to the patient that Datapalooza has done has done a really good job of. And we emailed about this conundrum. So you know all about this, and but I wanted to set the stage, and I've done this on every video about Health Datapalooza, which is the basic premise of what we're doing here. And please give us feedback on how you think this is going. Would you please introduce yourself and explain, if you can, like how we met, what you're working on when we met, what you're working on now. I wanted to pull this up. Excuse me. I think we're watching us stream on our other streaming channel. So I'm sorry about this. This is your website. Would you start here? Well, first say who you are.
Okay. I'm a human being. My name is Christine Monkhouse. I'm the founder and CEO of Patient Orator. I am a very strong patient advocate for health equity, but essentially what I'm advocating for is humanism in healthcare. I created a documentary called Humanizing Healthcare, came out right at the beginning of COVID. And so my purpose and existence in this space and my entire adult life has been focused on the patient voice, making sure that we're talking about health equity, we're talking about health access, we're really making sure that patient experience is something that is not just spoken at conferences, but we're given a voice or amplifying the voice of people around the country.
So health equity is a complicated topic. It's become a little bit of a buzzword. The right, unfortunately, politically has attacked the term equity. Could you give a definition of health equity? So when you say that, especially because it is so politicized now, what do you mean by that?
So for me, a lot of my work is geared around the population that I've worked with in the past, right? So I'm an underserved woman, I'm Black and a woman, and so I automatically fall into that category. I'm also an immigrant. But for me, the people that I've worked with in the past in terms of patients, they were people that are from low income communities, people that are Black and brown, and regardless of race, fell under this minimum wage category. So when I look at that population and their inability to access healthcare in the same way someone who lives in a different zip code does, that to me is an inequity. It's not being able to access fresh food or vegetables. It's not having good built and lived environments because of how the infrastructure is set up. And it's just not having the same access as people who are different from or of any race or income or gender, etc. So that for me is what equity is, or inequities are.
Very good. What is barrier breaking healthcare communications? What's this about?
So this is a concept that I've been pitching, believe it or not, since 2018.
Okay.
Before the pandemic, I was talking about to different stakeholders about the need for making sure that the patient voice is heard, leveraging technology. You see, I come from this background of care coordination and working on the front lines of healthcare. And one of the things that I saw was people being discharged only to be readmitted into the hospital.
Yep.
And/or when I was accompanying patients to their health appointments, I saw that their voices were not being heard. They were just blatantly being disrespected or disregarded, right? And I also live with a condition called uterine fibroids, and it's something that happened to me where my voice wasn't being heard. It led to me having numerous emergency room visits, et cetera, et cetera. What we are working on here is something that will flip the script on that narrative. We want to make sure that people have the safety and security that they feel in the privacy of their own home to record how they feel when there is a symptom that they're experiencing. So being able to record that so they feel confident when they're interacting with their healthcare professionals in a healthcare setting. So we're kind of working on removing the barrier for the patient to communicate about things that are usually stigmatized for groups of people. Because oftentimes when patients come in, what you see is people dismissing them because they're a woman, they are being stereotyped as hysterical because they're Black, their skin color dehumanizes them in a way that it shouldn't be. We should be judging our character, not so much the color of our skin. But unfortunately with medicine, these are things that exist, and we want to make sure that the patient voice is heard. So we're helping people capture their story in this mobile app that will help them communicate it better to their providers, and in the future have that information be sent virtually to that provider so they see why this person is coming in. They can address the social determinants of health, they can address the symptoms, etc. So it's looking at the whole story rather than stereotyping someone.
So could you give me an example? Let's say there is a Black woman who's living in, let's say, just to be super general, a zip code that doesn't have access to a grocery store with fresh vegetables. And she has something that she is uncomfortable talking about and is painful. There's 100 things that could be. Just starting from there, what is the experience that this person might have with your software that would be better than going into an ED and being dismissed, maybe given some opioids for the pain, go see your family doctor. Not addressing the underlying issue, not really listening, potentially causing an opioid addiction because you're just kind of get out of my hair type experience with the healthcare system. In that story, tell me where your intervention hits and what happens differently.
So from the comfort of her own home, she would be able to use this software to record what it is that she's experiencing.
Is it a website? Is it an app?
It's an app.
Okay.
So being able to create a story around what the symptom is, how she wants to be treated in a culturally competent way, and what social determinants of health. So what needs that she may have. So in that example, she has a food insecurity, so she is going to identify that is something that she has.
So my last doctor told me I should be eating more vegetables, but I haven't been able to do that because I can't get to a place that does that. So she's saying that into a system that's recording her on video. Is that right? It's
recording in a text format, or she can voice it using voice. So she's recording that. It's creating this short narrative, a story, that will then help her communicate that effectively with the doctor. But what we're looking to do with this is before she even arrives to that appointment, that narrative is sent to that provider so that provider knows why this person is coming in. They can proactively start putting the teams in place to make sure that she is getting those food resources in a closed loop kind of manner.
So maybe, and we just infer, I'm just making some assumptions here. You tell me if I'm hearing the story right. So doctor knows that their social worker that can get access to maybe vegetable delivery service is going to be on Wednesday. And rather than having this person come in when they call on Monday, on Tuesday, say, can you wait until Wednesday, and then you can see me to talk about your healthcare issue. And then immediately afterwards, you could also see the social worker that can arrange for you to have the fresh vegetables that might be help you deal with your anemia or whatever it is that's this complicating factor. Is that the kind of benefit that you're hoping to kind of accrue? Is that right?
Exactly. because again, I worked with underserved population, and I'm not separated. I am from that group,
Right.
and have seen how it is incredibly intimidating for a patient to walk in and say, I'm hungry, right? But I've seen patients come into the hospital just because they're going to get a meal from that hospital
Oh,
stay,
wow.
right? So it's something where there is that fear. And so how do we counteract that fear? We make sure that people are talking about it, that they know how to speak about this, and we're providing them with that tool to do so. We also have partnered with a SDOH resource directory from right within the application, that people can source those resources in proximity to where they live. But really, to make this something that is meaningful for both the patient and the provider, we want to connect that information to make sure that this patient's needs are really being met, and that the voice is really heard.
It sounds awesome.
Thank
Do
you.
you want to show anything specific? Should we browse to a particular part?
No,
Is this
no,
good?
no, no.
And
This-
I
this
would
is-
love. I will after you leave and
Yeah.
after this is all shut down, and when I'm at home, because I'm so burnt out from talking. I can't tell you how
I
much
can
I
only imagine.
want to talk anymore. But tomorrow, during my silent time, when
Yes.
I will avoid humans altogether, I will definitely press play on this See Patient Orator and Action website. I think that looks really cool.
Thank you.
Let's see what else I think is just interesting. I got a blog. I will read a couple blog posts.
You're on the blog, actually.
Oh, I am?
I interviewed you. We were on the opposite side of the
Oh,
chair many
really?
years ago.
No, I remember this. Okay, well, I'm so glad. Well, I will definitely not read that blog post. That is not
It's a
something.
video. I'm sorry.
Well, okay, so yes, I will definitely not watch that tomorrow.
Yes.
When I'm trying to recover from that, because that will be like watching myself speak will be precisely what I need a break from.
Okay.
But I will go back and I'll watch that. That's awesome. So how are you doing personally?
Yeah.
How is business? How is it to be an entrepreneur offering a service, coming from the communities that need these kinds of services? Are you getting the traction that you feel like you deserve?
Let's start there. Absolutely not.
Okay.
Right. Like I said, in 2018, I was pitching this, but I was doing it to the wrong crowd.
Okay.
Right. Because when I spoke about food insecurity and making sure that the patient voice is heard, that they feel safe in communicating that, the entire audience said, great idea. But what is a food insecurity? This was in San Francisco, where there was this lack of awareness that these problems exist. And if you think about that environment, there's so many homeless people around there. Right. So,
well, and there's also the San Francisco is a perfect example of a place where you can be very middle class and have food insecurity.
Exactly. But the folks that were funding solutions,
that's not how they
right?
think.
No, they're disconnected from the reality of what it means to be someone who's not from from upper class society, someone who's working and to feed their family and things like that. So I was speaking to the wrong people, but I wasn't aware that I was doing that. I am still today very mission driven to make sure that the patient voice is heard. If people are treated in a human way, I would not be doing the things that I'm doing. Right?
No, so you are a perfect example of an entrepreneur who wants to not be in business, right? I mean, and I think there's a whole class of entrepreneur, health tech entrepreneurs that would much prefer that their services were not necessarily needed, but recognize also that they are profoundly needed. And so I really respect that. Have you found better traction elsewhere?
So what I will speak to is the fact that now we're talking about social determinants of health because of COVID, and George Floyd has risen, like the civic uprising around racial inequity. These things have all happened simultaneously over the course of the pandemic, right?
Yeah.
And so now we have the awareness about it. Now we need to see action, the dollars being put to the entrepreneurs who have been on the ground, who live in these communities, who have these same problems. That's where I'd like to see things change in the next couple of years.
So let me ask you, if you don't mind, and I'm forgive me for going down a little bit of a rabbit hole. Do you know if you have a good code that you can bill for this? And it's unreasonable that you should have to have a code. But do you have one? Is there one? I mean, because there's the Z codes for social determinants of health, which I think now Brennan and I were just talking about are dramatically underused. There's no incentive to use them, and so in some senses there is a diagnosis code that already exists for these problems, and I think it is a true statement. I can't as a journalist, I cannot say that it's a true statement, but I believe that it's true that in many cases, the places where they need to be tracking the Z codes the most are precisely where they don't feel like they have the bandwidth to track the Z codes. And so, so I think that is very much a missing data point. Are you finding? I would assume maybe you would find more traction with maybe ACOs or people who have long term have financial incentives to keep patients healthy.
Yes. So we're looking at the Medicaid space.
Okay.
And coincidentally, I've always said that this is the population that I want to make sure that we're serving. Because if we can fix for their needs, everybody in America would be healthy.
Right.
Right. So we're looking at Medicaid and we're looking at specific diseases and the codes that can be utilized in combination with the Z codes as a part of social determinants of health.
How far along is the technology? Are you in beta? Are you how's it going?
So we have the patient-facing piece of it already built to a certain point, which is in beta. And we are also looking at a component that would essentially help us integrate with the EMR so that this fits within the workflow of the clinician. That is being worked on, and that has not been built in its entirety yet.
Well, listen, I want to keep talking to you for a few minutes off camera about like maybe what's your fire strategy and all this kind of stuff. And I think we've had some really great conversations about strategy in the past, so I want to continue doing that. What I would like for the audience to hear from you, though, is maybe you've been doing this for a bit. What are 3 things that you wish you knew as a health tech woman of color entrepreneur that you have learned over the last 3 years? And if you can't come up with 3, you got 2 big ones or 4, answer that question as flexibly as you need to. But what do you think are the big lessons that you would hope to pass on to other patient entrepreneurs who are mission driven, are trying to break in, and that would have saved you a year or a few hours, whatever you think is most important?
The first thing that comes to mind is that as passionate and driven as I am about the mission of making sure that there's humanism in healthcare, this is a business and everything moves with that dollar sign, right? And I wish I knew that, not to sound naive, but that is I think something very critically important for people to figure out very early on. The second piece is to know who the right people are. Network is important.
Well, you've been talking to me for early on, so you clearly have gotten all bad advice there.
Networking is important. Okay. Coming from being an immigrant and not having the kind of community around me that understands technology or even healthcare in the way that I now do in some regards, you're already starting out at a disadvantage. So find the people that are going to support you along the way. There were so many people who just ignored me, right? And then there were people that actually spoke with me and gave me good advice and recommended that I speak to someone else. And although it has taken such a long time to even get to this place where we're even sitting and having this conversation, it has been absolutely worth it because I've learned so much along the way, not only about healthcare, but relationship and relationship building. I don't know that there is a third, but what I will say is if there is someone who is working on a solution, whether it be technology or not, keep at it, do it. We absolutely need to make sure that patients are being treated in an equitable way, they're being treated fairly, that they're accessing care in the way that they should, and that we're really making sure that health, which is really about humanism and a human experience.
Could you tell me more? Because you said that so many times, and I just feel like I need to know more. Tell me what you mean when you say humanism in healthcare.
So I'll keep it 100%, right?
Okay.
When I worked on the front lines, I saw people being physically abused. I saw people being verbally abused. I saw a lot of things that I wouldn't want to happen to a family member of mine, and just a blatant disrespect for human life, right? So
sounds like you mean literally treated as a human instead of as an animal.
Exactly. On the very minimal side, I've heard people refer to patients as a room number. That's the very least of the worst that I've seen, right? But it's really making sure that we are treating human beings as human beings.
It's interesting you say that. Would you mind just having a little bit of a digression about that? So one of the things, so one of the balances that I think is important to think about and discussing is the balancing between privacy um, and effectiveness. And I think there are things that we have done for the sake of privacy that aren't effective for privacy
Mm-hmm.
and serve to, I think, dehumanize a little bit
Mm-hmm.
in problematic ways. And I think your example of the room number instead of the patient name is a perfect example of that. Um, uh, the I've said this example before, but I think it is a farce. When you've seen the people that you've helped, they're stuck in a hospital, they're wearing a gown, they're naked on the back,
Mm-hmm.
they're walking around trying to figure out how to get a glass of water, right, showing their backside to the whole world. They're in pain. They don't care that they're showing their backside to the whole world because that's not the problem they're trying to solve, right? They're not trying to protect their privacy. They want to feel okay. They don't want to be in pain. They don't want to be hungry. They don't want to be thirsty. So when we talk about like, well, protecting that person's privacy,
Mm-hmm.
but then not solving these other kind of very, very low level problems,
Exactly.
it's there's a profound hypocrisy there. And so I wonder, these policies and these practices that we've set up for HIPAA, and of course, I actually think in general,
Yeah.
at a high level, HIPAA has been good policy. But I do wonder if when those things have gone too far, because what you're describing is a situation where someone's being abused, and yet we're protecting their privacy by talking about the room number. I mean, it's
Yeah.
just silly,
Yeah.
right?
It really is. When you're, for me, coming from the front lines, it's a, and you come to conferences and you hear about some of the policy things that are being done, and it's just, why aren't we looking at solutions that are low hanging, that can be very practical? And if you ask anyone who any clinician, anyone who's worked in a health system, they will have a solution to a problem that they see and know exists. But usually those problems become amplified before they get the attention to really be addressed. Yeah.
Make us big for the rest of the uh, show here. And I think it's a fascinating issue.
Mm-hmm.
And I do think that there is an aspect to your technology proposal is kind of a soft tech
Mm-hmm.
approach. This is not like, let's give a VR headset to everybody on Medicaid. This is very soft, low level innovation that is right within reach, low hanging fruit, I think is what you just said. And I really love that idea, and ideas like that. What I was going to say. Oh, if I was going to give a person who was just about to try an idea like this, an entrepreneur, some advice, what I would say is there's a well-worn thing saying most companies fail to start up, and that's true. A huge portion of companies fail, but what I think that glosses over is that entrepreneurs who try to start companies sometimes need a couple at bats, and then they get off the ground.
Mm-hmm.
And I hope this is your getting off the ground vehicle. But it took me, I think, 4, maybe 5, depending on how you count, kind of attempts to get off the ground before I formed my current company. It seems like it's going well. It seems like they don't need me anymore.
Yeah.
So they're doing well and also don't need me, which is, from my perspective, the definition of success.
Mm-hmm.
So I would encourage you, like, maybe this whole thing's gonna go down in flames, but that's not the same thing as you failing. That's the company failing, and maybe your third at bat, second at bat, fourth at bat, whatever it is. Is this your first?
Yes.
Okay. Well, it would be amazing if your first works. It's so awesome, and it looks like you're well on the way to doing that. So brilliant. But I would encourage you, that story that people tell is a fear-based story about companies failing. But entrepreneurs generally succeed. It may take them a long time, but I wish I could say that with data. I wish I had data to prove this is the case. But the entrepreneurial spirit is something that we desperately need, especially talking about the kinds of issues you're talking about. So, do you want to talk about anything else before we turn off the stream?
No, I appreciate the opportunity to have this conversation. It means so much outside of healthcare, right? So outside of healthcare, but also within the context of healthcare.
Right.
When I was on the front lines, and I would work the night shift and I saw certain issues, I would say to my manager, this is a problem. Like I would flag these issues, like we need to address this. My voice was ignored then.
Mm.
My voice was ignored when I was pitching this idea, and people, they didn't understand that these are real issues that regular Americans have.
Mm.
And then come COVID, and I also made the documentary Humanizing Healthcare and got people from
And
around.
you can, by the way, you can get that from that website that we just showed.
Sure, I will send you a link.
Okay,
Yeah.
so if it's not on the website,
It's not.
then I will try to put it in the show notes so that people can find that.
Yes.
Carry
So again, people from around the country talking about their experiences, talking about not being treated in a humanized way, talking about really wanting to make sure that their family and friends are really treated with the best help that they possibly could get. And I continue to be in this space and continue to talk to folks. And I'm just so very appreciative of this opportunity to be listened to.
Well, thank you so much.
Yeah.
I mean, on the other side, like I am concerned that I don't listen enough in general.
Yeah.
The reason I listen to you is because you have a bullseye proposition. I mean, you are absolutely nailing the center of what is important to be addressing in the healthcare system right now. I mean, and you're also taking, I really like your approach, which is let's get this minimal intervention that really addresses, again, the center of the problem, which is that they're not being listened to.
Exactly.
And it also has the two things that I love to see in an intervention, which is you have a mechanism that you're intervening and changing the path, right? So you don't go to the ER to get ignored. Instead, you go over here to do this. That's beautiful. But then you also create an accountability trail, right? Mm-hmm. So that you can look at the care that was delivered and you can look back and say, all right, well, this was the complaint. This was the characterization of what was needed. Did the system do what was needed for this person? And so I think that's the magic feedback loop. Mm-hmm. So,
and that accountability trail is on both ends, not only the clinician, but also the patient. Because when these things happen, when we're going through a crisis, we tend to forget once it's over, or that we're not remembering. So when we are recording what it is that's happening,
it's accountability in all directions.
Exactly.
Which creates partnership.
Exactly.
Right. If we have a partnership and you're accountable and I'm accountable, that means that that this dynamic of who's in charge or compliance and all of these kind of issues where we're using these terms that create a kind of unequal footing, I think is really addressed. So I'm concerned that maybe I don't always listen to people who don't have incredibly well thought out plans and that I'm dismissive. I try. So my policy, and you tell me if this is good enough. My policy is I have a very, very high consulting fee for the second hour. The first hour is, if you want to sit and eat with me, I will talk to you about anything you want for a whole hour. And I think we've had that experience. This is probably the second kind of experience.
Yes.
I should have
offered you're not charging me.
No, I should have offered you a drink so that we're definitely in this period.
Yeah.
And you're teaching me as much as I'm teaching you right now. But I try to be super generous with those kind of first insights, because I want people to be able to get off the ground. And if I think your idea is terrible, which I'm going to let you know, you are I would never do this on camera, but first ideas where people come to me and they pitch me an idea, I'll say, look, your idea is beautiful. I love that you're a mission-driven person, but it's not going to work because of these things, right? And it can be painful. I've had people cry. It's not fun. But at the same time, wouldn't you rather do that than spend a year figuring it out on your own?
Exactly.
Right. And so I hope that policy, and by the way, part of the reason I come to Datapalooza, audience, is that it allows me to aggregate a bunch of people at once. So if you email me, and lots of people email me they read my book and they email me and say, hey, I want to talk to Fred, could you Zoom call with us? And the answer is, no, I can't, because I wouldn't do anything else if I did that. But I can have lunch with 3 people or 4 people at once at Datapalooza. I can have, a morning appointment and a morning appointment and a morning appointment. So I come to Datapalooza. I sometimes come to HIMSS, and I have I'm a little bit conflicted about health. Have you been to health?
I have, but not since the pandemic.
HLF?
Yes.
That one?
HLTH.
HLTH?
Yeah.
I do not like the idea that they try to make people into billionaires. I think you should probably be a millionaire. I think you should. I think your your idea is good enough that you should be able to live very comfortably based on the fact that you've changed healthcare with this solution. But when you talk about making $1 billion in healthcare, I think you're almost always talking about making it worse in some way. I don't know that that's so. I'm very conflicted about going to health, but wherever I go at the conferences I go to, I try to make myself available because I'm hard to get a hold of otherwise, and I want to be able to give that first hour of consulting, which is the most valuable by far, right? Because it's like if your idea has serious flaws, I try to tell people, is that good enough? Is that the right way to approach things? Could I do better?
I don't have the answer to that. I think that, to your point, right? Time has become such a valuable currency.
Yeah.
Right. So you have to be the determinant of you have to discern how you use your time with entrepreneurs and anyone in general, because like I said, people are underestimating the value of time.
Yeah. I've got enough gray hair to know. So thank you so much.
Of course.
Thank you. This is so much fun. Audience, we're going to say goodbye. I think we're going to talk about ACOs and minutia about Medicaid. Maybe that'll be off stream. It'll be you're not missing anything.